Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me this week, where we have a lot of things to discuss, including a very promising update on the ongoing actor strike in Hollywood. This past week, there were updates on two separate reboots of films that I really enjoyed that I would like to discuss as well. Plus, there was a full-length trailer release for the 5th season of the FX series Fargo that I'd like to talk about since I think a lot of people have just forgotten about this really good series. Then finally, I will give you my review of the second to last episode of the current season of Star Trek Lower Decks and also give you a few predictions on what I think will happen in the finale. Now, this is usually where I say thank you for watching and please like and subscribe, which you should definitely still do. But last week, I announced that I will be moving this podcast to another channel, and if you're curious as to why, you can check out that podcast in the link below. But basically, starting either next week or the week after that, I'll be releasing all my new podcasts on my second channel, which is currently named WDIM+. I put a link to that channel in the description, and I'm also putting it at the end of my videos. If you do enjoy my podcast every week, please make sure that you are also subscribed to that channel so you will get notified when my future podcasts come out. So let's start this week's podcast like I usually do with a strike update. But this update could be one of the last ones I give you. Not because I'm tired of talking about it, which I kind of am, but this is really important. But it does look like we might be close to the end of the actor strike. So this story comes to us from Variety. It says that the SAG Actors Union is expected to hold bargaining sessions with the major studios over this weekend as the two sides continue to work toward a deal to end the 106-day strike. Now, of course, you're going to be probably listening to this on Monday or sometime during the week. So by the time you hear this podcast, we may have another update already because I do record these on Sunday night. So they're supposed to be negotiating right now, and the CEOs offered a new proposal last Tuesday that they hoped will break the 3-month stalemate. The Actors Union countered on Thursday. While some progress has been made, the studios remain frustrated at the SAG Union's bargaining position. The SAG Actors Union wants a new structure for streaming residuals, which would augment the residuals currently in place. The union also wants protections against the use of artificial intelligence to create digital doubles. Among its proposals is a minimum pay rate for digital doubles, as well as union consent. The studios have balked at giving the union a veto over the use of AI. Now, the reason why I say that this may be the end of the line is because Hollywood studios and the producers have already said that they're only giving them this week to negotiate, and then if a deal is not done by the end of this week, so probably by Monday, then they will not negotiate with them until 2024. Now, this kind of matches up with what I've been saying on my podcast since the strike began, which is that this is all paced by when movies come out. And of course, we have the holiday season coming, and there will be some big movies coming out, even though many have been delayed. And I'm going to talk about some other delays that have happened in the last week of movies or shows that you may be a fan of. But basically, if they can't get a deal done this week, then the holiday season is done. They're not going to be able to get the actors to promote the movies. And if they don't know that the strike is over, they can't schedule the film to be released in 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, because you can't just say, okay, it's Tuesday, the strike is over, we're going to release the movie on Friday. You've got to prepare, and they're not going to be able to do that if they don't know that the strike is done. So if they know that the strike will be done this week, then they will be happy and, everything goes back to normal pretty much. But if they can't get a deal done this week, that means they can't guarantee any kind of actor participation for any releases done over the holiday season. So it doesn't behoove the Hollywood studios at all to make the deal or to even negotiate, because they're still going to have to push all these movies back due to this strike. So this is really a make it or break it kind of situation here for the actors and the producers, but it does seem like they are closer than they have been. At the beginning of the week, they seem pretty far apart, but now as I'm recording this podcast, it does seem like they're going back and forth on like details and stuff like that. So you don't have anybody just walking away saying, oh, these people are crazy. Again, this kind of matches up with what I've been saying, and I do hope that a deal gets done hopefully by the time you're listening to this podcast. And of course, I will update, next week on whatever happens. If there was a deal or if there wasn't, I'll give you the details, kind of like I did when the writer's strike was over. But as it stands right now, I'm optimistic. This sounds like they are getting close on making a deal. It seems like this digital double thing is now the big crux of this negotiation, where the studios basically just want to be able to pay somebody once to use their digital likeness, and then they can use it for hundreds of years or how many years that, film is still a thing. and only pay that person once, which seems kind of crazy. You should be able to get something if they're using your likeness, even if you are in the background. I did see some of this technology in use. There's some Disney show that tried to use it, and it looks really bad. Like, if you center on the background characters, you can see that they don't look human at all. So the technology is definitely not there yet, but it will get there. Of course it will get there. So I think it's smart for the Actors Union to be like, no, we're going to nip this in the bud right now, because it always makes me think about Napster. You know, when Napster came out and basically destroyed the music industry, because now all of a sudden people could download music and they didn't have to go to, you know, their local record store to buy anything. The actors are trying to prevent this. They're trying to save their craft and make it so what happened to the music industry doesn't happen to their industry. And I think that's very smart. You know, you learn from other people's mistakes, and that seems to be what they're doing now. I know that some crazy stuff has come from this too. Like, there was something over Halloween where they asked the actors not to dress up as characters from like Hollywood productions or something. I think that's kind of silly. Who cares if, you know, somebody dresses up as Captain Marvel or Pee Wee Herman or something like that? I don't think that makes a lot of sense, but it shows you how, you know, petty some of these people can be, and how, I mean, I know that this means a lot to a lot of people, and the actors really want to get, you know, what they feel they deserve. So I don't want to diminish that, but it did seem kind of silly to me to hear that, you know, the actors were being asked not to dress up as certain things. I don't know, but that's just my opinion. I do hope that this actors strike is done by the time you're listening to this podcast. And once again, I will update you all on the details of whatever happens next week. So before I move on, I just want to talk about a couple of things that were delayed that you may be interested in. It was announced that Deadpool 3 has been delayed. There is no release date for that. The original release date was for May 3rd, 2024, and only half of the movie has been filmed, and they haven't been able to do anything since the SAG strike has been going on. So because of that, it has been taken off its release date, and we don't know now when it will be released, but that is definitely a movie that I want to see. I like the Deadpool series. I think of all the X-Men movies and the MCU movies, and now I think this is going to be a culmination of a lot of those movies together. I think we could see a lot of cool cameos. I don't really care about Taylor Swift. I know my daughter does, but I don't really care if I see Taylor Swift in the movie, but it will be cool to see Wolverine and maybe some other variants and stuff like that. So that's a movie that I'm looking forward to. The Aquaman sequel is kind of the next big movie that's supposed to be out, but I think it's probably going to flop. That has been delayed just a couple of days into the holiday weekend. And Dune 2, which is another movie that I know a lot of people who listen to this channel are looking forward to. That movie, if you can believe it, was originally scheduled to come out this Friday, but it has been delayed a couple of times, and now it's being released on March 15th, 2024. So that's a situation where the movie is done, but since the actors can't promote it, the studio doesn't want to release it because they know it's not going to do as well at the movies and at the box office if there aren't actors to promote it. And yeah, stay tuned to this channel for any updates on the strike. And hopefully next week I will have a very good update to share with you all. But let me know what you think of this in the comments below. So next I want to talk about a couple of remakes that look like they are moving forward. The first movie I want to talk about is a remake of the film The Running Man. So of course everyone remembers The Running Man. That was, you know, one of the big movies for Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was coming up. And that film was set in a dystopian United States between 2017 and 2019. And it featured a television show where convicted criminals called runners must escape death at the hands of professional killers, and it was loosely based on a 1982 novel of the same title written by Stephen King and published under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. Now, the actual novel that it is based on is very different from the film that we saw. The story in the novel does follow the protagonist Ben Richards, which was the character played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, as he participated in the reality show The Running Man. But in the story, contestants were allowed to go anywhere in the world and are chased by the general public, who get a huge bounty if the convict ends up getting killed. So I feel like this story could really be done well, given the current state of social media and how, you know, even in our society right now, everywhere you are, you're getting filmed. So imagine if there was a reality show where there was just a criminal out there trying to get away from people, and, you know, everybody's got a phone. Like, that's not even the future anymore. That's now. And they're just, you know, looking for this person. And if they find them, then they get a huge reward. That's something that I could definitely see being popular in this society. So I think that a remake of this film could be done really well. I know that the recent Arnold Schwarzenegger remake, Total Recall, was not done really well. Like, that's an example of what not to do with this remake. And I think that if they actually don't really use a lot of aspects of the original film, but more so lean on the original story and cross that with, the current state of social media and our culture, I think that this could be really good, especially if they get, a good lead actor and a good villain. It could be a really good movie. But spoiler alert, the story ends with a plane crashing into a building. I doubt they're going to end this movie like that. That might be one aspect of the original story that doesn't play out in the film for obvious reasons. But I do think that this could be really good. Now this story comes to us from Deadline, and it states that The Running Man, Stephen King's dystopian novel that was loosely adapted into an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie in the 80s, is getting a new adaptation from none other than Edgar Wright. Wright's adaptation will stick more closely to King's book, which was set in a world where people risk their lives on a deadly game show to earn $1 billion jackpot. Wright is tackling the story adaptation for the film with Michael Bacall, and Bacall will write the script. Now, Edgar Wright wrote and directed the movies Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. He did a lot of other stories, too. I think he originally wrote the film Ant-Man, but then he had to leave the project. This new movie, again, will be more faithful to King's book, and he is working on the story with Michael Bacall, whose credits include Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which Edgar Wright was also involved with, 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street, and more. And they're trying to get this film in production in 2024. So maybe after the actor strike is over, then we might hear a casting update. I can think of a lot of people that would be good in this. I hope that Arnold Schwarzenegger is given a role. Like, he doesn't have to be, Ben Richards, but it would be cool to see him return as some other character and not Killian either. Like, he's another main character that I'd like to see done really well. I think Jared Leto maybe could be a really good Killian. Like, seeing Jared Leto as like a crazy game show host, I think that would be really good. I don't know who I would cast for Ben Richards. Maybe the guy who does Jack Reacher on the series. I can't remember that actor's name. He's pretty good. But this could be a remake that I'm really excited about. Like I said, I wasn't excited about Total Recall, but this could be one that's pretty good. But let me know in the comments, are you a fan of The Running Man like I am? I was a huge fan of that when I was growing up. That was probably my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie because it really combined, thought-provoking sci-fi with a lot of like cool action and interesting, flamboyant characters. It's hard not to love that movie, actually, if you're just a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. And I think it was really good, and this remake could be good too. But let me know, what do you think of this news? Are you excited about a remake of The Running Man? Or do you think that this movie is one of those movies that just shouldn't be touched? I think, especially given the current culture and climate and social media, I think that this movie is perfect for a remake, and especially if they lean more on the original story, then we'll see a lot of different things than the original movie. Now, some people might say, well, then a lot of people who are going to see this remake and are expecting, like the crazy characters that were in the Arnold Schwarzenegger adaptation will be disappointed. So maybe they'll sprinkle some of that in too. I don't know if there will be stalkers in this movie because I'm not sure if there were stalkers in the book. Stalkers are like the characters like Dynamo and a Sub-Zero was one of them. The guys who the runners face off against. I think that that might be something they may have to add into the story, even if it wasn't in the original, because you want that core fan base that loved the movie that came out in the 80s to like this film as well. But let me know, what do you think of this news, and will you be watching a remake of The Running Man? The second film that looks to be getting a remake is the film Highlander. Now, for the first time, Lionsgate will be launching sales at the AFM on their long gestating fantasy reboot, which has Henry Cavill aboard to star as the eponymous Scottish swordsman, and John Wick filmmaker Chad Stahelski is set to direct. This will be a big budget proposition north of $100 million. The director himself has previously talked about it as akin to John Wick with swords. The team is eyeing a 2024 start. Now, if you're not familiar with what AFM is, because I wasn't either, every November, Santa Monica's American Film Market, or AFM, becomes the center of the feature filmmaking universe. Films are bought and sold. Projects are pitched and funded. People are connected, and careers are changed. So this looks to be just some kind of event where ideas about movies are sold to bigger companies. So Lionsgate would just produce the film, and then some other bigger company would buy it up and actually, bring it to fruition. The new movie will be based on the 1986 original, which starred Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, and Clancy Brown as immortal beings hunting down one another and collecting more power. The time-jumping film, with its "There Can Be Only One" tagline, spawned 4 sequels and 3 TV series, including the popular USA series starring Adrian Paul. Queen memorably provided the soundtrack for the original movie. I was also a huge fan of the original Highlander. I watched the sequels too, but I wasn't really into them. I was really into the series on USA as well, so I found it was interesting that they referenced it in this article. But I love that series with Adrian Paul. I probably watched every one of those episodes when they came out, and I'm psyched about this because I think that this is another film that can be done in, with new technology, because the sword fights in that film are pretty lacking. Like, if you go back to the original Highlander, a lot of things still hold up, I think. I think it's still a very creepy movie. Like, it kind of has this Terminator-esque weird creepiness to it. And Clancy Brown is amazing. His character will probably be the hardest one to cast because of Clancy Brown's performance. And again, I hope Clancy Brown, much like Arnold Schwarzenegger getting a role in the Running Man remake, I hope that Clancy Brown gets a role in this Highlander remake as well. I just think that his character, Krugel or something, what was his name? Krugen? I can't exactly remember his name right now. Something like Krugel or something. Krugen? Kraken? It's not Kraken, I don't know. But really, I just love that film. I mean, Sean Connery is awesome in that movie. Christopher Lambert does a really good job as the character. Just in the sword fights, he's not great. I mean, back then, I don't think they had to worry as much about sword fighting. Just look at the original Star Wars films if you want to look at how bad, hand-to-hand sword fighting was in the films in the 80s. I think that, with new technology, new choreography, and this director who was, a part of the John Wick franchise, I mean, come on, nobody's doing action better than those films right now. I think you could do a really good remake. And then, unlike the Running Man remake, this potential film already has a huge star attached to the lead role, and that's Henry Cavill. And he's obviously someone who's looking for a new franchise to latch onto after just being given the boot as Superman. And I think he did a pretty good job as Superman. I like pretty much everything that he's done, actually. I think he's a really good actor. And I think that he could do, Connor McLeod really well. I almost feel like he might be better in the villain role, in the role that Clancy Brown played, because they're both such, huge guys. Christopher Lambert wasn't a huge guy. He was more like a wiry kind of guy. So I don't know how they're going to find somebody bigger than Henry Cavill to tower over him like Clancy Brown, his character did in the original. So that might be something that's interesting to watch. But again, this is another film that I really liked when it first came out. I watched it plenty of times while growing up. I even watched the sequels, and some of them are pretty bad. I didn't know there was any more than one series, the original one on USA with Adrian Paul, but I definitely watched every one of those, and I really like that one too. So I'm psyched for this. I think that it already has some good people attached to it, and they think that this will get bought at this AFM thing. So after that happens, if we have any update on that, I will update you on this channel as well, because this is a story that I will be looking into because I think it could be really good. But let me know, are you a fan of the Highlander series? Did you watch the films? Did you watch the series? Are you going to be watching this remake when it comes out? Or, just like my question about the last remake I talked about, is Highlander a film you think should not be remade anymore and should just be kept the way it is? I think that, besides Clancy Brown, getting a cool band to do the soundtrack would be another way to get fans of the original into this film, because Queen did such an amazing job with that original film. I mean, there are parts in that movie where the music is so perfect that it's almost like you're watching an opera. And I think that will be hard to replicate. You might need to get John Carpenter attached to this movie too to get the music that good, because the music was so good in the original that will be hard to replicate in a remake. But let me know, what do you think of this news, and will you be watching a Highlander remake if and when it is released? So next, I want to talk about the new trailer for the 5th season of the series Fargo. Now, this season is set in Minnesota and North Dakota in 2019, so right before the COVID-19 pandemic. It stars Juno Temple as Dorothy Lyon, a seemingly typical Midwestern housewife living in Scandia, Minnesota, whose mysterious past comes back to haunt her after she lands in hot water with the authorities. John Hamm also stars as North Dakota Sheriff Roy Tillman, who's been searching for Dot for a long time. Other cast members include Jennifer Jason Leigh as Lorraine Lynn, Dot's wealthy but stern mother-in-law, Joe Keery, who is from Stranger Things, as Gator Tillman, Roy's loyal son, Lemoyne Morris as Deputy Whit Farr and Sam Spruill as Old Munch, a mysterious drifter whom Roy employs to help track Dot down. So one thing I noticed from this new trailer is that it shows a different take on the infamous kidnapping scene from the original Fargo movie. Now, if you're not familiar with the series, it's an anthology series, which means every season is different, but there are little things that connect them, and there are also some little connections to the original film Fargo. But one of the more interesting things that's happened is that there have been scenes from the original film that have been kind of remade on different seasons, and they're done differently. So it's a different outcome, or the character does something different, or somebody doesn't die that died the first time, or something like that. So it's really interesting, and it looks like they're doing it again with this season. And if you remember the original movie, there's a scene where the kidnappers kidnap, the wife of William H. Macy, and it's a very funny scene, and then quite a few things happen after that. It looks like in the trailer that the scene starts out the same way. Like there's two people that are going for this housewife, but the housewife is much more prepared than in the original film. But the characters are what make this series great. Like every season has these really intricate, interesting, weird characters that you probably would not find in any other series or movie. And they just fit awesome into this kind of mythology. There's also this alien kind of subplot that some seasons touch on and some don't too. So there is a sci-fi aspect to this show as well. The 5th season of Fargo, an American anthology black comedy crime drama television series created by Noah Hawley, is set to premiere on November 21st, 2023 on FX. It will consist of 10 episodes. Originally, the season was scheduled to premiere in September of 2023, but was delayed due to the actor strike and the writer strike that I just spoke about. One of the things that has happened, I think, to this series, because when it first came out, it was really popular, and I think it still wins awards, but I think that it may have fallen out of the public's eye after there was a 2.5-year break between the 3rd and 4th seasons, and now it's almost a 3-year break between the 4th and 5th season. So in 5.5 years, there's only been 2 seasons. Which, when you're trying to, have a series that's popular, that's kind of hard to do. That's almost like how movies get released, not how seasons of television get released. So I think that for that reason, a lot of people aren't really talking about Fargo anymore. But I think it's great. I mean, season 4 was really good. And really, like I said, I just love the characters. I love how there's little Easter eggs to the original mythology created in the film. And again, you should definitely watch this trailer, because if you saw the original film, you'll see what I saw, that it looks like it's just a different take on that kidnapping scene. And she goes a little Home Alone, like Kevin McAllister on these kidnappers. And it looks pretty funny. The creator of the series, Noah Hawley, did say that this season should be a return to a more comedic tone. There have been a couple of seasons that have definitely been darker than the other ones. And it looks like they're trying to make this one a little lighter. I think the first season was probably the lightest, and maybe they're kind of going back to that one. That's my favorite season so far of Fargo. So this will definitely be something that I will be watching. I may be talking about it as well on my podcast on my other channel. So let me know, are you a fan of Fargo? Are you a fan of the film? Did you watch any of the seasons on FX? And do you agree with me that because it's been so long in between releases, that's why people aren't talking about Fargo anymore? But let me know, are you looking forward to the upcoming season of Fargo? Will you be watching, or have you just seen the movie and you're not really a fan? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so now let's talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I thought there were a lot of great callbacks in this episode. I mean, I love a good Baylock reference. I just think that, that Clint Howard character is one of the weirdest ones that Star Trek has ever created, and that puppet was cool, and I like how they worked that all in. I really thought that was cool. As always, you can check out my breakdown video of the episode if you like Easter eggs like I do. I look at all the Easter eggs and kind of break them down, all the references and stuff like that. And I talk about, the characters. So definitely check that video out. If you're into that, I'll put a link to it in the description below, and it will be at the end of this video. One thing that I noticed in this episode was that usually Lower Decks seems to promote the new era of Star Trek where anything goes. There is this sect of fans that like Star Trek that think that if it's not Gene Roddenberry created, it's not real Star Trek. If it doesn't show a utopia, then it's not the vision that Gene Roddenberry originally had. But in this episode, I really thought that Mariner provided some good commentary on how Starfleet should be better. And I think that was kind of her way of saying, Gene Roddenberry had a point, and we could have gone this route and shown that Starfleet, was acting in a utopia and always did the right thing somehow, and they could have been better. And it's kind of maybe a commentary on, maybe the nations of the world, that, maybe all the nations could be doing better and not be so quick to go to war. I am not making a comment on the current world climate. I know that the world is on fire, and I am not qualified to make any commentary on it. And this is not a political commentary channel. So that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to say that I think that during her speech, that was one aspect I really liked, where she said, Starfleet's supposed to be about exploration, not about war and stuff like that. I thought that Star Trek Picard, that series, also tried to make this commentary, but that was very much more on the nose, and it was in a shocking manner. We saw people getting killed, and we learned a lot of things about what Starfleet did during the Dominion War. I'm not going to spoil it for you in case you haven't watched a series that's been out for months already, but I think this is a little more subtle, and usually I think Lower Decks doesn't do this. I think usually we see things not just from the Next Generation, but we see a lot of stuff from Deep Space Nine and Voyager and stuff like that, and it's not just the Gene Roddenberry vision, so it seems like Mike McMahon does kind of follow that a little bit more than kind of old school Star Trek. But Mariner throwing in that commentary, I think, was smart. That, those people do have a point, that there is a way that Starfleet being better, it would not have been as realistic. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't have been as relatable. That's not how the world works, unfortunately. It's looking at the world we want to live in versus the world that we are living in. And I think that that's a common thought, when creating Star Trek is, are we going to talk about the world we want to live in, or are we talking about the world that we actually live in? And that's a struggle that writers in the past and currently have to go through. And I think that that's some good commentary on that aspect of the creative process. Of course, in this episode, it was revealed that Nicholas Locarno was responsible for designing the ship that has been stealing non-Federation ships. Now, I do have some opinions about this reveal as well as Mariner's reveal, but I'm going to preface this by saying I understand that we are in the 9th episode out of 10 in a season. So I know that I shouldn't have very strong opinions right now, because they may, some of my questions may get answered in the final episode. But here we are sitting between episode 9 and 10, and these are kind of my feelings about it. Maybe you're feeling the same thing, maybe you're not. Everybody has a right to their own opinion. But this is kind of what I think right now of this reveal. And my initial thought about the reveal that it was Nicholas Locarno was, why him? We may get this revelation in the finale, why it was him that's doing all this and why he, took Mariner. But to me, putting him in there, it felt like it was a rushed answer to something that's been set up all season. And if it does have something to do with Mariner's past, maybe this is something that's been building since the series started 4 seasons ago. But having him be, the man behind this ship really came out of left field to me. I don't understand why they thought it was important to include him. Now, again, I'm going to talk about this in my predictions, that maybe there is a future tie-in, but I still think it's kind of rushed. Like, I don't understand why it's Nicholas Locarno doing all this. He doesn't really have any ties to the Lower Decks crew, unless somehow this connects back to Sito, and maybe she's not really dead, because in the episode where she supposedly died and she was reported that she was killed in action, they never retrieved her body. I think it was just like the shuttlecraft that she was supposed to be in was damaged or something and she wasn't in it, but they never said that she was, dead for sure. I may be wrong. I haven't watched that episode in a long time, but my memory says that that's what happened. So maybe there's some connection. I mean, it didn't seem like she was very attached to Nicholas Locarno in that episode. I think it was called The Last Duty with Wesley Crusher and, everything that happened at Starfleet Academy. But I just thought that was a reveal out of left field. I thought that whoever was responsible for this ship had something to do with the history of Lower Decks. Like, we were going to see a character come back that we recognized, or we were going to see something that, tied into the history of Lower Decks, not just some rando character from the history of the Next Generation, and I guess Star Trek in general, because, of course, Robert Duncan McNeil went on to do other things. But to me, I just think it came out of left field, and for something that you've been setting up all season, it shouldn't feel like that. It should feel very much like, oh, this makes sense. This is why we've been seeing this every week, because it's this guy. But like I said, it may be explained in the finale, but right now, this is what I feel. I don't understand why it was him. And if it was him, why did he allow himself to be on that list? It was pretty cool to see him on the list with, Beverly Crusher and Seven of Nine and Thomas Riker. But if he's the reason, why was he on that list? Did he want to be found? Maybe we'll find that out in the finale too. But again, there's a lot of things here that don't really tie together for me. And for something that's been set up for so long, I kind of feel like it should fit together better. Now on to Mariner's backstory. Hearing Mariner's backstory connect to Sito was very meta, considering the fact that Sito supposedly died on an episode of TNG named Lower Decks, which according to Mike McMahon is where he got the idea for the series. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, considering that, for one, Mariner's parents are both in Starfleet Command, and she seems to rebel against them. So why would Mariner choose an ensign, like the lowest rung on the command totem pole, to look up to? Also, Sito almost got kicked out of Starfleet Academy because she got someone killed and was going to cover it up. Why would this act make anyone look up to her in any way? Plus, why would Sito dying make it so Mariner doesn't want to be promoted? Sito doesn't order anyone to their death. So why would Mariner associate this action with Sito? Like, all that stuff doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Mariner has this line where she's like, if being an ensign was good enough for Sito, then it's good enough for me. Sito died 2 years after she got out of Starfleet Academy. How do you know that she didn't want to be promoted? Just saying that being an ensign was good enough for Sito, it wasn't good enough for her. She died on a mission, and she just so happened to be ranked ensign when it happened. So again, it just doesn't make sense to me why Mariner would look up to this person. If her parents are both in Starfleet Command, why would an ensign be someone she looks up to? And more so, why would she rebel against her parents, who also are in Starfleet, if she's looking up to this character? And this is a character who almost got kicked out. Like, I know that Mariner always gets demoted and stuff, but for her to look up to a character that almost got kicked out of Starfleet Academy for getting someone killed, like, why would you look up to that person? Just because they were stationed on the Enterprise D? A lot of people were on the Enterprise D. I understand that that's like the best ship in the fleet or whatever, but it just all seems very convenient to the story, but doesn't really follow the history of the character. And I understand that Mike McMahon, wanted to have this connection to the original TNG episode, The Lower Decks, but he may not have gotten there organically, which is why I feel it's forced. And the thing that I think really epitomizes this is the title of this episode. The title of this episode is The Inner Fight. So any TNG fan will think, whoa, that just sounds exactly like The Inner Light, so maybe we're going to see some connection to that. Well, we didn't. We didn't really see anything in this episode that had any kind of connection or reference to the classic TNG episode, The Inner Light. So again, it's kind of like how this went with Mariner's reveal. Like, we get these, connections to the episode Lower Decks, and it's so cool that now we know the episode Lower Decks has this connection to the series Lower Decks. And yes, that is cool, but why? Why? It doesn't make sense why that came to be. So you can't just force it in there. It's like naming the episode The Inner Fight and having no real connection to the Inner Light. You're just trying to, pull on the nostalgia of that moment or something like that, which I don't know that, Mike McMahon would do. He's always been using things from the history of Star Trek and making them better, not just using them because, oh, this would be cool to see in an episode. He's not, I don't think, one of those kind of guys. That's just my feelings on these things. Although I do have some problem right now with the reveal and all this, I will say that it is an improvement over last season's reveal. I mean, I don't think we need any more AI villains for a while in Star Trek. We definitely got some this season on Lower Decks still. I think it was episode 7, so a few episodes ago. But I think that Star Trek can, chill with the AI for a while and let's see, some cool other plot lines and not any more AI villains because, we had Discovery. I think we even had some on Strange New Worlds. And, of course, last season in the finale, that was the tie to the main villain. So I'm glad it's not AI. Hopefully we don't get any AI in the final episode. But before I get into my predictions, let me know, what did you think of this episode? Do you think I'm crazy? Again, I am conceding that a lot of these things that I have a problem with may hash themselves out in the final episode, but this is a lot to hash out. So I'm not really confident that we are going to get there, but at least I'm being honest about my feelings, and maybe some of you are feeling the same way. So let me know in the comments. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you agree with what I said, or did you have a different opinion of this episode? Let me know in the comments below. So now let's go to my Season 4 finale predictions, of which I have 3. So my first prediction for the finale, and this is probably one that a lot of people got to, is that Thomas Riker will appear in the finale. For one, the other 3 characters that were on that list in this episode were either on Star Trek Picard last season or were seen for the first time in a while in this episode of Lower Decks. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we could see Thomas Riker also in the finale. Again, why is his name on that list if he's not, in some way a part of this? It also seems like Jonathan Frakes is always just available to help out a Star Trek show when needed. I mean, he'll star as Riker, he'll provide his voice. He's already been on Lower Decks a couple of times, and he'll direct an episode whenever, they need him to. So it just seems like he's just one phone call away from, whatever they need him to do. So getting him to voice the character Thomas Riker is probably pretty easy, and I think it would make a lot of sense for him to return as that character, having voiced Will Riker already. It's also worth noting that Robert Duncan McNeill has become an accomplished director since his time on Star Trek. He's the director of this really good alien comedy series, but for some reason, I can't remember the name of it right now. But that's kind of like what's happened with Jonathan Frakes. He was on Star Trek The Next Generation, and of course everybody knew him as Will Riker, but now he has this great career as a director as well, and Robert Duncan McNeill has kind of had a similar career trajectory, so it would be cool for them to voice characters in the finale and kind of interact playing characters that were not the main characters either of them played on their series. So that's my first prediction, that Thomas Riker will appear in the finale. My second prediction is that Brad Boimler's clone William will also return, and he was last seen in the Season 3 episode Crisis Point 2. Since he served under Captain Riker on the Titan and is also a clone, him and Thomas Riker obviously have a lot in common. So if we're going to get Thomas Riker back, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring William Boimler back. And the last time we saw him, he was revived and he was going to be a part of Section 31. Well, half the people that go into Section 31 turn out to be crazy and bad. So I wouldn't be surprised if both of them are somehow connected to Section 31. And maybe this is, tied to Section 31 or tied to something else. But I do think that Thomas Riker and William Boimler will somehow team up with Nicholas Locarno. So that's prediction number 2 for the finale, that Brad Boimler's clone William will return. And my third prediction is that these 3 villains, Thomas Riker, William Boimler, and Nicholas Locarno, will be defeated by a dream team-up for Boimler consisting of himself, Captain Riker, and Tom Paris. We talked about some things that have happened that have set up Mariner's story. We know that Boimler loves Tom Paris, and he loves Will Riker. So for him to be able to team up with both of them to defeat, basically their clones, I think that just serves up just a great episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I mean, don't you? I think that that's definitely where we're going. That's maybe why Mariner was the focal point of this episode, because Mariner and Boimler seem to trade off on who's, the main character. So the fact that she was the main character in episode 9, it's a 2-part episode, to make Boimler the main character more so in episode 10, I think makes a lot of sense to me. So that's my third prediction, that the team of Thomas Riker, Nicholas Locarno, and William Boimler will be defeated by Captain Riker, Tom Paris, and Brad Boimler. And if this happens, then Mariner, Tendi, and T'Lyn are another team of 3 that can, take out the B-plot of whatever else is going on. Maybe they go after the ship and those 3-on-3, have like a Kirk Fu style battle or something like that. But I think that this kind of would make the most sense for the finale. But let me know, do you have any predictions for the finale of Lower Decks? Let me know in the comments. And also, what do you think of my predictions? Do you think that any of them will come true, or do you think that all of them will come true? Let me know in the comments below. Well, that is all I have this time, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Also, remember to check out my other channel, WDIM Plus, and subscribe so that you see when my future podcasts come out. Thank you very much for joining me this week. Please hit that like button before you go, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?